This review and commentary of a shoot incident that occurred November 30, 2014 in Chicago, Illinois is only intended for future training and self-critique of ourselves. It is not intended to overly critique the off-duty sheriff's deputy by the name of Michael Raines, who was involved in this shoot incident, and it is not intended to necessarily armchair quarterback him. However, I believe that we can all take away an education from other individuals' experience. In this case, we have an experience that was recorded on CCT cameras in front of the Funky Buddha Lounge located on Grand Avenue in Chicago, Illinois. The time of this incident was recorded on camera as 3:55 a.m., but according to some other records, the incident occurred at approximately 2:30 a.m. This may have been near the after-hours point of this club, and the Funky Buddha Lounge is known as a hip-hop music type of club where alcohol is served. Again, not to overly critique Michael Raines and his involvement in this shoot incident, but I believe that we can all learn something from the activities that he engaged in on this early morning hours. Now, the incident initially, I'm going to go through a very brief explanation before I run the video on this. This incident involved some individuals that were possibly associated to this SUV parked in front of the Funky Buddha. The Funky Buddha Lounge is here, the main entrance, and I believe there's two adjoining doors for this entryway. These individuals standing here to the left rear, or the driver's rear area of the SUV, were involved in the incident, and a vehicle that will come into view on the driver's side of this SUV and the occupants of that vehicle were also involved in the incident. Now, Mr. Raines, Deputy Raines, who was off duty at the time, he would have been to this direction, to the right of the screen, and completely around the corner on another street. The issues that I have noticed by way of reviewing this video several times and some discussion with some colleagues has opened up some concepts that I'd like to highlight, and one of those, the primary one, is the location, the environment, and the timing of the incident. The tools that were used by Raines at the time of the incident, to include not only his firearm, but any lighting devices, communication tools such as a cell phone, and any spare ammunition, or the lack thereof. The other issue that I'd like to cover is pre-shoot and post-shoot psyche and mental preparedness for an unplanned event, which this appears to have been unplanned on the part of Raines. And then also I'd like to cover support systems for individuals that are lawfully involved in a shoot. This would be, in essence, the good guys, not the bad guys. The bad guys are always looking for an advantage or looking for a victim, and so I'm not really concerned about their psyche or their mental health, albeit that is of interest when it comes to why a perpetrator would engage in their activity or engage in specific activity, and we can talk about that with one of these subject individuals that were adversaries to Raines during this incident. So again, this incident occurred November 30, 2014 at either 2:30 a.m. or 3:55 a.m. on Grand Avenue in front of the Funky Buddha Lounge with Michael Raines. Let's go ahead and lead into this. Michael Raines is no longer alive. He passed away almost 1 year after this shooting incident, and this was not as a result of any physical wounds that he received. He was not wounded during this incident. But let's go ahead and just start off. As I mentioned, this vehicle comes into play, bumps up against the SUV as it's rocking. These individuals ran towards the sidewalk and then immediately respond to the driver. Looks like there's a bit of an argument or an altercation that ensues, And based upon Captain America's reaction, looks like somebody's got a weapon. We've got everybody backing off, hands up, and we have an individual who appears to have just discharged a round. This would be a Fernando Lopez, who appears to have been the driver of this light-colored automobile. And as he alighted from the vehicle, you can see him here with the striped shirt and the knit cap with the fuzzy ball on top. So he's this individual here. Then there's some other individuals that came out of this automobile. Now, as Lopez runs out of view, it looks like he discharged a round based upon this person's reaction. And now we have another view from another camera. Here we have Lopez and another individual that may have been Nunez. And then there's also a person by the name of Orta, Mario Orta, who was involved in this incident. We see Lopez walking across the street, pursuing the people that had run in that direction, and followed by what I believe is Orta here, and then possibly this other individual, Nunez. In this light-colored circle is the area that Michael Raines responded from. You probably noticed that he was running from the corner, behind the corner of this building, and runs into the scene, apparently because he heard shots fired, or a shot fired, and began to respond. Lopez, Orta, and the other individual continue to walk in this direction as some occupants from the lounge come out of the door, and as Raines appears to come into play on the street, possibly in the central area of the street. This is another view. We have Lopez here, possibly Orta here or here, and then over on this side of the screen we'll have Raines will come into view from this camera. Here again, Lopez and possibly Orta. These are going to be our primary subjects that were adversaries with Raines. Now, as Orta and Lopez walk, well, actually, Orta remains across the street. Lopez approaches the driver's door of the automobile. Raines will come into view here. Obviously, it appears that he's got a weapon drawn and pointed at Lopez, and we can see the muzzle flashes from Raines' handgun here and here and there. So it looks like 3 rounds were discharged, at least within those frames. As Lopez begins to retreat, and as Orta remains in the street, very casually walking, as Raines discharges another round, a 4th round, at Lopez. And if we go back to this frame here, and we watch Orta, he just very casually walking to the right flank of Raines as he's discharging rounds at Lopez. Again, still just walking very casually. Now, the cameras come into play from another view, again in front of this. This is the doorway, one of the side doorways for the Buddha Lounge, the Funky Buddha Lounge. And here we have Lopez running towards the sidewalk, followed by Raines. Lopez begins to collapse as Raines follows him, weapon drawn. This appears to be a compact or a subcompact pistol. According to the report, Lopez had dropped his handgun in the street. And we will see Orta following Raines as Raines puts hands on with Lopez, taking him effectively into custody, going hands-on with him. And then we see Orta walking in with both hands clasped in front of him in the classic double-handed grip for a handgun. Raines possibly appears to notice Orta at this point, rolls Lopez around as Orta continues to walk towards the doorway. Again, handgun in both hands. This is the side door for the Funky Buddha Lounge. And here we have Rains establishing a defensive posture, squatting down behind Lopez, effectively using Lopez as something of a shield as he continues to appear to try to maintain control of Lopez. Now, Orta opens the door and enters. Here we see him entering that entryway for the Funky Buddha Lounge, and here is the back of Rains with Lopez directly in front of him. He appears to be trying to communicate, giving commands, and still giving commands, appearing to try to communicate. One of the things that I take away from this is that Rains does not appear to be looking over his shoulder or attempting to secure his back in any way, not knowing if there are any other possible assailants that might be trying to outflank him. Another question is this vehicle remaining in this position. This will come into play in just a few minutes. So Rains continues to be giving verbal commands with the gun to Lopez's head. He appears to duck as Orta probably discharged around, and now there's some movement that will be moving around this way, and Rains appears to be trying to give direction while he continues to try to use Lopez as a shield. We have at least two people walking in behind Rains. Rains is not aware of that. Now from this camera angle, and this is all in time sequence, was put together by the authorities, we have Orta has apparently gone out this other door and circled back around, possibly around this SUV that was struck by the other automobile. We noticed that that automobile that Lopez and Orta had alighted from is no longer there. So, we've got at least a third person that is an associate of Orta and Lopez. And here I believe we've got Orta approaching Rains. We have another individual alighting from this vehicle that is stopped in the middle of the street as Orta continues to approach Rains very, very casually and directly, very much like any predator would stalk a potential victim or stalk a potential target. In this case, we've got Rains still on his knees, not a lot of body coverage from Lopez, and Orta quickly approaching, very directly approaching, very, very immediate, almost arm's length contact at this point with this other subject that's alighted from this vehicle, also directly approaching Rains. Orta appears to try to outmaneuver Rains, takes probably a shot at Rains. Rains does not appear to return fire, and as this person here just continues to stand there. Now this may or may not be Nathaniel Nunez, who is also implicated in this in criminal charges related to this incident. Here we have another takeaway. Rains is waving his handgun around. He's in a situation where he's on his knees. We've got another individual standing directly over him. Orta, who is known to have a handgun, is now possibly out of view and his whereabouts unknown to Rains, as he's struggling with Lopez, who appears to be attempting to gain some type of control over Rains's handgun. Another takeaway is if we did look closely at, or as close as we could at Rains' handgun, and it appears to be a compact or a subcompact. Goes without saying very much that there's a limited capacity of rounds to discharge from that handgun, and again, Rains does not appear to have reloaded at any point, in my view, and of my several views of this video. So I believe that Rains may have expended all of his cartridges and may have had his weapon dry at this point without any cartridges to expend at any assailants. So he's got a possibly unarmed, or by all appearances unarmed, adversary here. He's got a wounded adversary at his knees who is struggling with him with his arms, and he has Orta, who is known to have a handgun and apparently discharged at least 2 rounds at Rains, and his whereabouts are at this point unknown. I believe this is a female who came over to this vehicle. There is a lot of communication going on between these two vehicles and then the light-colored vehicle that had run into the SUV that initiated this entire debacle of a situation. And we have Mr. Rains here struggling with this subject. I think it also goes without saying that Rains may have committed with a bit of tunnel vision to his focus on Lopez. Again, when Orta was on Rains's right flank, I don't think Rains was looking at him as a potential adversary or a threat. And we've got this door with people that can come and go. So some things that Rains may have considered, or if someone else, a good guy, is in a similar situation, if you've committed to being involved in this incident, and at this point it's not a matter of just remaining on the corner and calling for assistance or calling and reporting what you are seeing, but if you are actually, for some reason, compelled to be actively involved in this shoot, there's always that possibility that, you know, you've got a wounded assailant here. You don't have to keep hands on to that person. You can back off and retreat back through that doorway, perhaps even barricade yourself in the room, or even get your back up against the wall, or again, try to secure your position as best as possible. In this case, Rains elected to remain mostly on his knees and holding on to Lopez. We still have this individual. There's been a limit of traffic at this point. Some people had probably seen the shooting and elected to go away. But, you know, once again, a dark street. We've got, I'm going to back that up just a moment again. Dark street. We've got automobiles that are beginning to accumulate in the immediate area of this shooting. And this is an active shooting at this point. It's still an active, ongoing shoot. We've got a female here. Who knows what's going on with this person? This vehicle is associated with this person, and he is having an inordinate amount of contact with Rains. Big potential threat there. And of course, Orta is down the street, or was last known to be down the street in this direction. This will switch back to this other scene, or this other angle. We have another person who's now meandering into the immediate scene. We've got this man giving directions or instructions, possibly to Orta, possibly indicating to leave the area in this vehicle. But again, we've got multiple threats in different areas. And because of that, you know, again, my question well after the shoot is, you know, why is Rains remaining on his knees, possibly with a weapon that is no longer useful as a firearm, and still he's not aware of any support or backup that might be responding to assist him, and he's got an unknown number of potential assailants around him. He's pointing the weapon down the street there intermittently. Again, Lopez is trying to reach up for the weapon. I believe that this is Orta coming back into play. Still last known to have had a firearm. This person moves forward as a distraction, backs up, and again, I don't see any rounds being discharged by Rains, so I believe his weapon is empty. We have Orta boarding or approaching the driver's side of this vehicle. Appears that he may have dropped something, possibly the magazine from the weapon. That's not unknown to happen with people that are not familiar with weapons or even very familiar with their weapons. Orta boards this automobile. We see the trunk lid pop open. Big telltale, worrisome situation. In my view, I would have immediately suspected that this person was, or even Orta was going to attempt to retrieve a long gun from the trunk. We have another Captain America running into the area. Apparently the weapon was pointed at him, or he was threatened in some way, and he retreats. Here we have Orta and this other individual going up to this vehicle. Rains focusing back on Lopez again with these individuals out of view. Now, we've got a lot of traffic driving through the area. A lot of these people are not aware of what has happened. However, there are some pedestrians that appear to have been aware of what was happening. We have this man running away, probably from Orta. I believe that this is another Captain America type. A lot of Captain America shirts in this video. He may have been trying to give some legitimate assistance, but Rains at this point is, you know, at this point, several minutes into this incident, Raines is not going to be trusting anybody that he doesn't know or that is not clearly identified. I don't know what his level of experience was, but more than likely he's thinking of everybody as a potential threat, especially with the amount of time that has elapsed. Here we get another view of his handgun, and that pistol, appears to be at best a compact and probably a subcompact, and goes more to my belief that he has expended all of his rounds. In just a moment, I believe Orta will come back into view. Raines is probably still hoping that the proverbial cavalry will arrive. Here he appears to address another threat, wrestles with Lopez a bit. Here we have, it looks like Orta has returned, and he's pointing, or appears to be pointing his handgun at Raines. Here Orta comes back around to the driver's side of this automobile, and we will see him assume a customary position to take a shot. Now he runs away. Of course, we could see Raines responding by ducking. At this point, we can see why Orta has now decided to retreat. We have lights flashing and probably a siren blaring from here and probably from here. Orta and the other assailant have retreated to this area, and I believe at this point they leave the area. Here we have a patrol vehicle driving by, and you can see Raines is waving his hand with the firearm in the air in an attempt to attract attention, to let the good guys know where he is. Probably would have been a good idea to have a light of some type, a light, small Surefire or something similar, a AA battery-powered flashlight to try to get the attention of the good guys. Plus, the good guys usually know that it's other good guys that have flashlights. Again, we'll comment on that in just a moment. The patrol vehicle overshoots the position of Raines. Is this another Captain America type? We have some more people coming into the area. This man puts the trunk lid down. Patrol vehicle turns around, coming back to Raines. He's still apparently shouting and waving. He puts the weapon down, retrieves his identification. He probably should have had that out once he knew that the patrol vehicles were coming into the area, and wisely puts the weapon down so that he is not identified as a threat by the responding officers or law enforcement personnel. At this point, it appears that Lopez has given up. This is probably bodily fluids, blood, etc., in the area where he had been being held by Raines. And at this point, we have other people responding to the area, and Raines, remaining in that position to clearly identify himself, to be able to give information to the responding officers. A couple of the key elements on this video is this elapsed time of Orta, again, in a very predatory manner, circling and stalking Raines. He's clearly attempting to get close, to take a contact shot. This individual acting as a buffer or a distraction. Clearly, at least in my observation, this individual was probably with Orta and with Lopez, because he appeared to retreat and advance whenever Orta would be in close proximity to Raines. So a couple of the takeaways prior to the shoot is that Raines may not have been adequately armed if he only had a compact or a subcompact pistol with limited rounds and no spare magazines or spare ammunition to support a longer engagement other than several rounds being discharged at one or two assailants. He did not have any type of a light device to assist him in an obviously dark environment, or an environment that would have allowed for the use of a light device. And light devices are as simple as something as small as this. Of course, the lighting here is not that great, but in essence, we've got a small single 123A battery-powered flashlight that would have provided any much higher level of illumination to assist Raines in this situation. In addition to that, Raines did not appear to attempt to communicate with the authorities other than possibly summoning assistance from passersby or other people that were in the immediate area. Raines appeared to have developed tunnel vision and focused on remaining with Lopez during that entire contact until he knew that other law enforcement personnel were on scene. And that, in my opinion, is a critical error. Once he's got hands-on with that suspect, it does not mean that he needs to maintain contact and hands-on contact with that suspect, especially with the suspect clawing at his weapon hand and attempting to either disable his weapon hand or possibly retrieve the weapon from him. Now, within 1 year after this shooting, there was obviously an internal affairs investigation, and I'm just going to go ahead and let this play through one more time. There was an internal affairs investigation and a shooting investigation regarding this incident that Raines was involved in. Raines was, the subject of that investigation, and was undergoing a lot of pressure and a lot of scrutiny. There is a report that on October 8, 2015, Raines, while still on administrative leave or not active as a peace officer, was on a Chicago bus line, and when the bus driver ended the I'm going to go ahead and let that start back from right after the shooting. Once the bus driver ended, I believe it was a female, once she ended her route, she found Michael Raines unresponsive on the bus. He had passed away. He was subsequently determined to have expired, and the cause of death, according to the reports, and this is at the age of 33 years of age, his cause of death was fentanyl toxicity. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid, and as many people know, the United States is having a very high number of heroin overdoses and fentanyl overdoses. The singer Prince expired from a fentanyl overdose, at least based upon my understanding and belief. We don't know if Raines was using heroin and or fentanyl prior to this shooting incident, or if this was a result of some activity after the shooting incident and as a result of the scrutiny and the ongoing investigation. He was subsequently cleared of any wrongdoing in this incident, but it appears that he may not have survived to be aware of that. And that is a bit of a tragedy in and of itself. There was also a report that Raines had suffered from excessive alcohol use and heroin use. Again, these are reports that I've been able to glean, and those sources are not absolutely verified, so this is not intended to disparage Raines in any way. But if, in fact, he had fallen victim to alcohol abuse and or drug abuse after this incident, or even beforehand, that brings into play our use of support systems as just, non-criminal types. Support systems are very important, whether that be family, colleagues, professional support, or even, if necessary, mental health support. And obviously, Raines had fallen through the cracks in some way, shape, or form. His fault, other people's fault, or no one's fault whatsoever. Nonetheless, by all appearances, Raines fell victim to that. And that in and of itself is tragic. In part because here Raines engaged in this ongoing threat situation, this ongoing adversarial situation with Lopez, Orta, and possibly Nunez. All three of these individuals have either pled guilty to the crimes that they were associated with during this incident or are awaiting trial. All three of these individuals, sadly enough, survive Raines, and Raines is gone in spite of his dedication to overcoming at least 3 assailants. Here we have Raines again ducking down and grabbing Lopez in a defensive posture. So preparation ahead of time, mental preparation, having some type of strategy or tactic in mind before a person ends up in an adversarial situation like this, especially with a guy proning himself out on the roof of that vehicle and Raines apparently not being in a position to return fire. Very sad and unfortunate. So hopefully we can learn some things from this incident and the video associated to this incident. Hopefully the good guys, I hate using that word or that term, but we might as well use it. Hopefully the good guys can learn something from this and avoid ending up being a decedent in advance of wrongful assailants, which I think that's the best thing that we can call Lopez, Orta, and Nunez. So hopefully we can have some good takeaways from this, and all the best. Take care.